Why would you quit everything just to go travel the world? Why wouldn't you? Hey, I'm Carlos, and welcome to the AbroadCast. Here on the AbroadCast, we share how to travel the world and the uncommon destinations and adventures that you need to experience. Whether you have 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years to spare, the AbroadCast will help you make your dream travels a reality on any budget. Hey, I'm Carlos, and I'm your guide on this world travel podcast. I've been wandering the world for the last 3 years, checking adventures off my bucket list, and we're going to use that experience to help you craft your next travel adventure. Let's get this started. Now, most people, and I'm assuming everyone listening to this podcast, have thoughts of traveling the world. We dream of checking off those experiences and destinations from our bucket list that we've been fantasizing about for as long as we can remember. As romantic as this idea is, bringing it from fantasy to reality can be tough. But a comforting idea is when we actually have the time for our dream trip, we usually share the same hurdles and questions. Where should I go with my precious 2 weeks a year? What should I do for just enough and not too much? Creating that dream travel experience, but not getting burnt out. And thinking a little bit further, when I get all the way around the world, how do I get around? Taking the bus? Hopping an Uber? Is it safe? Should I call it quits at 9 o'clock at night? Or am I safe to wander until 4 in the morning, exploring the street food of Bangkok? And the most important one is, can I afford it? Very few of us are wealthy, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy life, so how can we make this thing possible on a budget? And there are so many other fear-inducing questions. Though these are good questions, and you should ask them to create a worthwhile adventure, allowing that fear and anxiety to stop you is not the answer. That's where the AbroadCast comes in to help. Our conversations will be all about guiding you from this idea of dream travel to picking the right destinations and adventures, planning just enough to make your travels carefree, and sharing my own personal secrets and those of my friends about how we bounce around the world in a fulfilling way and how you can too. I can't repeat this enough. Our goal is to simply get you traveling, but better and more adventurously, and creating those budget adventures so we can cram it into those tight financial situations. Now, this may all sound like a grandiose idea, but how are we going to make it happen? How are we going to get you traveling? In each episode, we'll share some key knowledge you need to travel better and to make the experience easier and more carefree. In addition to that, we'll entertain and inspire along the way. That way, in these lull periods, when you're waiting for that next trip, we can keep you fired up. And to do that, in each episode, we'll start with where to go, a new idea and a new approach to destinations, whether it's for a specific adventure, a specific theme, or a specific experience. And I'll introduce my framework for how I actually design my travels around the world to be the most fulfilling and fit my budget. After we're done sharing this knowledge, we'll follow up with a story, because what makes us travel isn't necessarily the guidebooks and the itineraries we get past. It's the wanderlust. It's that honest envy for those experiences we've heard about, seen on TV. Whether that experience is riding a motorcycle across Laos and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, whether it's learning how to surf on Bali, whether it's being educated about strength and love by an 8-year-old Afghan girl in a refugee camp, or whether it's simply creating lifelong friendships over the course of traveling a foreign land. I promise these stories will spark something in you that will change your travels in the future. Now you know a little bit about the AbroadCast, what we're here to do, and why we're worth listening to, but I want this to be a conversation as we craft your travel experience together. So, let me share a little bit about me. My name's Carlos, and I write at abrootherabroad.com, all about travel. Now, I'm sitting in Bali, on my couch, recording this for you, in the hopes to get you in my position sometime in the future. But how did I get here? How does someone go from working a job in corporate America to ditching everything and just following their dreams? I'm glad you asked, hopefully. Now, when it comes to travel, I'm a bit of a late bloomer. I did not start until I was about 26 years old. A friend of mine twisted my arm and got me to go with him to Munich for Oktoberfest. He said he was coming from the States, and he arranged everything. He said he found a hostel for us. He said that he would be there before me. I trusted him. I'm adventurous, so I was fine. Now, when I arrived at our hostel in Munich, it was the most shocking thing ever, because it was just an open field. Come to find out, our hostel, because Oktoberfest gets pretty packed around Munich, it was a very, very large tent with lots of bunk beds, and neither the tent or the bunk beds had shown up yet. So I was stuck wandering around Munich on the wrong side of town for about half a day until my buddy got in. By the time he did, I was back over there, and it looked more like a refugee camp than a hostel. Now, the rest of that Oktoberfest experience, I'll save for another day. But just know that that is what sparked my wanderlust. I met a group of friends. We kept in touch for probably a good 7 years after that. We wandered around for a few days until Munich almost did us in. And then I took my first trip to Czech Republic with a group of people that I met during Oktoberfest. Our plan was to stay in Germany until the end, but our group just kind of wandered off. And I found this to be a trend throughout my travels, and part of what got me hooked. The people you meet along the way, the travelers you meet, and if you just let the situation go, you end up having some experiences that are pretty irreplaceable, and you'll hold on to them forever. But let's jump forward a little bit. A few years later, I had some time between jobs. I was moving out of my apartment. I was transitioning everything in my life. And I figured, instead of hanging out in San Diego and overpaying on my rent, maybe I could use that to go somewhere that would provide me another irreplaceable experience. I asked a traveler friend of mine what he recommended, and he had a few pointed questions. He said, well, 1, do you like steak? The answer is yes. And he said, number 2, do you like women? And I said, yes. He said, okay, you need to go to Buenos Aires. And I said, where else? He said, just go to Buenos Aires and you'll figure out things from there. So I bought a ticket, flying into Buenos Aires, and 3 months later, flying back out so I could go to my next job. I bought a guidebook. I read it briefly and figured I could read this thing on the plane. It'll be fine. And went down to Buenos Aires. As I hit the bus going into town from the airport, I realized my guidebook was still on the plane. It had all my notes. It had my plans for the next 3 months. I made it to the hostel. This time it was an actual hostel. That place still remains dear to my heart because I made even more friendships there. And because they didn't have a guidebook in English that they could spare, I was forced to simply talk to people and ask, where are you going next? So for the next 3 months, I wandered around Argentina, in Buenos Aires learning Spanish, bouncing between UNESCO World Heritage sites, riding a bicycle with a group of people that I didn't know at the start and did know at the end, through wine country, just tasting wine and listening to the stories behind the vineyard. I'd gone until I reached the other ocean, made it back to the Pacific, and just started falling south into Patagonia and fell in love with the outdoors again. For a portion of the journey, I traced the footsteps of Doug Tompkins and Yvon Chouinard, the founders of Patagonia, and bounced from town to town, meeting people, trekking out into the wilderness, coming back, having beers with people, getting to know the Argentines, getting to know the Chilenos. It was a wonderful experience. And after 3 months, just under 3 months, I finally hit the bottom of South America. Hung out there for a few days thinking and realized I'd fallen in love. I'd fallen in love with travel, and this was something I was going to have to come back to. I would have to figure out a way, whether it was to escape every couple of years, to get this fix, or to make it a permanent part of my life, and then went back home. Now, if you've traveled before and you're listening to this podcast, I think you're feeling exactly what I felt when I got back. That urge to get out there and travel. That urge to get out there and explore. That urge to meet and feel other cultures. We just can't get that in daily life. But there's something about travel that called me back. Over the years that followed, I had plenty of opportunities to go bounce around a little bit, checking out a country or two. And they were wonderful experiences, but I realized there was a richness to getting beyond that first 4 weeks and falling completely into travel. Like I said, I'd fallen in love with it. So at some point, just after grad school, I decided it was time to create my escape plan. 3 months wasn't going to cut it. I needed to give myself, say, 9 months to a year. So, for the next 2 years, I methodically crafted an escape plan. I decided to build up skills that I could use to work from anywhere, just in case I decided to stay in a place longer than my money allowed. I used a tool that a friend provided me called the Passion Test and turned it into something I call the Drive Test to get down to exactly what I needed in life, what drove me, what was worth sacrificing my days for. If I was going to work 40 hours a week for one thing, what would it be? And I'm not just talking about travel. I'm talking about the specific destinations, the people that I wanted in my life, the things that I wanted to feel, the places I wanted to see. I used that to redesign my life and save as much as possible over that 2 years while I was teaching myself these skills that would help me possibly travel the world indefinitely. A couple years after I started crafting my escape plan, I had the fortunate event to get laid off from my job. Now, being a responsible professional, my immediate response was to clean up my resume and start doing interviews, but something didn't feel right. Something in my gut was saying, just stop for a second. Are you sure this is the route that we should go? And I remember it as clearly as if it was yesterday. I was sitting at my favorite taco shack at the farmer's market in Dallas. I think I was about 2 margaritas in, when I pulled out my drive test and retook it and wrote myself a bucket list, a 1-year bucket list of everything I wanted to do in that next year. Now, I think it's worth noting that I was satisfied with the outcomes in my life so far, but feeling if I continued on the natural path, prioritizing my job, a family, house, getting to retirement, something would be missing. Some of those things from my drive test that drive me, I would never experience. After I finished, I sat back and realized it was all outside of the country. So if I stayed on this natural path, all of these things, all of these dreams, these desires I had would die with that path. And I couldn't let that happen. Nothing was going to stop me. Not fear of the unknown, not anxiety, not figuring out a way to make it work financially. I just needed to see these things through. So I opened up my phone and I bought a 1-way flight to Bangkok for 3 weeks later. I sat back finishing my margarita, trying to plan this out, and realized the hurdle to leaving for me was everything I owned. So I offered up everything on Craigslist. 2.5 weeks later, I stood there in an empty apartment, most of my belongings in my 4Runner, which I'd planned to park at a storage unit, and one single bag, one 40-liter REI Trail 40 backpack. I took an Uber to the airport, and I haven't looked back since. It's been 3 years, 55 countries, more cities than I know, more faces than I can remember, but it was worth it. For some people that hear this, it might sound insane to just decide to go and just give up everything you have to go on this adventure. But the thing that kept me fired up was this bucket list. These things that I wanted to do, these experiences that I wanted, were to me valuable enough to keep on this path. I'll talk more about my bucket list later, but I'll give you a snapshot of it. The number one thing I had was to ride the Ho Chi Minh Trail by motorbike. A good 10 years before I was in Iraq, and if you haven't been, and you haven't been on a combat deployment, there's a lot of downtime. And there are magazines sitting around. At the time, it was usually like a Maxim or something like that. Well, one of these days, I found an article that had the adventures that you need to do before you die. I don't remember any others, but the Ho Chi Minh Trail by motorbike was there. It said that it was easier than you thought, and it would take you to places that you just weren't ready for. So it was on my bucket list. Spoiler alert, that article was absolutely right, and it was totally worth it. Another high point on my bucket list was to see the tallest point on the planet, Mount Everest, with my own eyes and make it up there under my own power without a guide. Another important one was to spend time giving back. And I've known a lot of Iraqis that I cared a lot for, and I have no idea where they're at or how they're doing to this date. And around the same time, I was seeing a lot of headlines about the refugee crisis in Europe. I wanted to spend some time giving back in whatever way I could. So I put it down on my bucket list to make it to a refugee camp, show up, and just do as much as I could to help for the time that I had. And the last point, which is a nod to the adventure yet to come, is learning to surf. Once upon a time, I was scared of the ocean, but if you see surfers surfing, I can't think of many other situations in life where people are so ecstatic about something so simple, something so natural. There's not much technology involved. It's just them, a wave, pure physical effort, and a bit of experience. And then as they're riding it, just an unreal ecstasy. I wanted to experience that, so I wanted to learn how to surf. And so many more things on my list, but the second I made this list and decided to make it a reality, nothing else was going to stop me. So if you do nothing else after this podcast, if you do not listen to a single other episode, and you have a desire to travel, I highly recommend sit down and write your own bucket list. Fold it up, put it somewhere and keep it. Come back to it. If you are fortunate enough to have the opportunity to take some time to design your life around those dream ideas that you have on your bucket list, you'll follow paths you never knew existed. And you'll become a person that's totally you and you recognize, but an interesting version. I highly recommend it. So now that you know a little bit more about me, consider me one of your traveler friends. And from here on out, this is going to be a conversation. I want to learn about you just as much as you learn about me. But we'll get to that more later. And let's get back to the AbroadCast. I did mention that there's an entire season of the AbroadCast coming. What can you expect? Hopefully, everything that you need to get traveling. But let's be a little bit more specific. In the next episode, we'll be talking about something I call the trails, or the trails around the world I've chatted with my friends about. You see, most people don't realize that on every single continent, there's a trail between countries and cities that if you travel it, it'll give you the highlights of the entire region, the easiest travel experience possible. And if you are up to meet travelers and interesting people, I guarantee it's the easiest way. If you're a new traveler, or if you're pressed for time, if you need somewhere that's easy to navigate, but you still get a rich experience, these trails are perfect. Now, what am I talking about? In Southeast Asia, there's the Banana Pancake Trail. You can start in Thailand or Vietnam, and it'll take you through the highlights of Asia. In South America, you have the Gringo Trail. Whether you decide to start in Chile or Argentina and end up in Colombia, it is another rich traveler experience. Continue on up, and you have the Maya Trail going through Central America. If you want to cut flight costs, and you're just going on a spring break from the US, this is a perfect opportunity. But what about if you're feeling a little more adventurous? You want a little bit more history. You want a little bit more foreign culture. Then the last two are right up your alley. The first is the Balkan Walk. Now, the Balkans, few people think about that when they think about traveling to Europe, but the experience is just as rich. The history is just as complex. The food is just as interesting. The beaches are just as beautiful, as you would have in Greece or in Spain. It can all happen on a budget, and it's so tightly packed it's easy to navigate. If you want to level up on the experience, you can push further into Eastern Europe into some very rewarding destinations like Hungary or the Czech Republic. And last but definitely not least, is the Middle East Trail. You will find an eye-opening travel experience that will reward your senses and open your mind. And there's even more beyond that, but we'll just start with those. Beyond that, we have something called the Adventure Rate. Templates for travel based on adventures that will naturally make you healthier and put you in some of the best destinations on the planet. We're talking about mountain biking, surfing, food, street food, volunteering, or even specific experiences to discover yourself. We'll get more into that in episode 2. Episode 3, how to quit your life and travel the world. Episode 4, I'll walk you through the drive test that I took that put me on this path and help you write your own bucket list. And then we go even deeper. In episode 5, we'll talk about the Banana Pancake Trail. Episode 6, the Gringo Trail. Episode 7, the Middle East Trail. Episode 8, the Balkan Walk. Episode 9, the Maya Trail. And so much more to come after that. Now, I told you at the beginning of the podcast, at the end of every podcast, we'll answer questions. And I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. But for this one, we're going to start with the homework. Number 1, I want you to sit down and write your own bucket list. It might take 30 seconds. It might take 30 minutes. Do it while you're watching TV. Spend some time reflecting on that because I want to plant the seed for things to come. Number 2, consider going to my website, abrotherabroad.com, and taking the drive test. It's a little lengthy right now, and it'll be cleaned up as the days come, but it will be an eye-opening examination of yourself, your desires, what drives you, and what's important to you. Next, feel free to reach out. We need questions for the podcast to come and making sure that we're answering the questions you have. We're giving you actionable information for travel. And last, share this with somebody. If you enjoyed it, if there's somebody you want to travel with, share this with them so we can make this a larger conversation. And last but not least is an action item from me, thanking you for listening to the AbroadCast, and I hope to see you here next time. Take care.